Norfolk Southern's Lafayette District runs from Wabash in Decatur, Illinois, to Peru, Indiana. This route does not have a very heavy amount of traffic that travels over its rails, but its importance by far surpasses its traffic levels. This route is former Wabash trackage. The Wabash had just over 2,000 miles of railroad in its glory days. Wabash's advantage was gained by having a direct route from Detroit to Kansas City, bypassing the major rail hubs of Chicago and St. Louis. Having been part of the merger mania in the 1950s and doing some time under Giant Pennsylvania Railroad, it eventually fell into ownership of Norfolk and Western in 1970, then Norfolk Southern in 1980. You won't see signature passenger trains such as the Wabash Cannonball or the Detroit Limited, but what you will see is action that has made the line into what it is today, which is a major artery for the auto industry. Agriculture also plays a major role on this line. We start our tour in Wabash near Decatur, Illinois. A pair of NSC 40-9Ws lead a grain empty out of their brush yard in Decatur, located on the city's southeast side. Sandwiched between the large facilities of Archer Daniel and Tate and Lyle, the location is the division point with the west end heading to St. Louis and Kansas City. It is also the west end of the Lafayette District to West Peru, Indiana. This is part of the Illinois division at a diamond called Wabash, cleverly named, as you may guess, Wabash and Illinois Central. We relocate past Lake Decatur to Sangamon, which is not much more than a quiet street with a crossover on the double track. This location is a little over a mile from the yard. Not too long after the first train clears, Train 272, which is a Kansas City to Winston-Salem, North Carolina bound train, passes. When this scene was captured in late 2011, locomotives in Conrail Blue were becoming rare with NS's aggressive painting program. If cars used in the auto assembly industry intrigue you, this line has what you want. The former Wabash is an artery of racks along with 60 and 86-foot auto parts boxcars. Triple-crowned road railer trains are the other common train to traverse these rails. A small cut of auto parts are on the head end of Train 145, which runs from Buffalo, New York to Kansas City. Train 260, a Kansas City to Sandusky, Ohio move, is one of the dedicated Triple Crowns operating in service that began in 1986. They offer bimodal logistics between St. Louis and Detroit. Today, it has grown to serve 12 key U.S. markets, along with Toronto, Ontario. .21T races west at Cerro Gordo, a small farm town of about 1,400 people. This train has a long and somewhat interesting route originating in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It travels west on the former Conrail to Butler, Indiana, then turns left on the Wabash to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and eventually on to Kansas City. A mile east of Cerro Gordo, Sandusky-bound crowns cross over 200 East Road and pass the old family farmstead, making for a great trackside prop. Good thing the field had soybeans that are gone and not fully grown corn, or this shot would have been impossible. A small 14E heads east at Milmayen, but it won't stay that way much longer. At Bement, it will stop to pick up cars before carrying on toward Bellevue, Ohio. At Bement, Train 145 glides west at Control Point Wiggins, where almost 20 miles of double track from Decatur comes to an end. The third unit is en route for the BNSF at Kansas City. In downtown Bement, the Bloomington District goes north to Gibson City, then west to Bloomington. To the northeast, the NS operates on the CN to Gilman and on to Chicago. This is due to the line being pulled out to Manhattan. Also for the historians, just 8 miles north of Bement is the Monticello Railroad Museum. A short 122 train with a former Oakway SD-60 trailing drags a train of mostly auto parts for Detroit. A trio of Spartan Cab EMDs makes the turn on the Bloomington District to go grab a grain train. The bridge abutments that the power splits just past the crossing is the remnants of the Illinois traction, later Illinois terminal. What few grades these trains encounter are no match for these single-unit auto rack and parts trains. 20T passes a dormant elevator in Payat. Today's 181 has a very healthy cut of high-cube auto parts cars up front that are bound for St. Louis. A train of 53-foot crowns that came off the BNSF at Kansas City and originated at Saginaw, Texas, are eastbound at Sedoras. The train is heading for the main hub at Fort Wayne, Indiana. These trains have huge advantages over the conventional piggyback and double stacks. They can operate over the highway as a semi, and within moments, with a special Mark V bogie, they can be assembled into a train. No lifting of cranes required, damage-free, and lightweight for only about half the locomotive power and fuel used in conventional piggyback trains. For slack in the train, forget about it. A typical road railer has 99.6% less slack than pigs and 95% less than a double stack. There is only 12 inches between trailers, so doors can't be opened, resulting in a safe, secure load. In Tolono, the towering grain silos of Sodorus are left behind as the tranquility is broken, not by the sound of Highway 57 off in the distance, but the slight rumble of the FDL-16 prime mover working in the distance. The power is dragging its string of white Wabash-built vans over the camelbacks toward dawn, and not only by the dawn of a new day, but the west control point of the siding in Tolono. Downtown Tolono is the crossing of the former Illinois Central's main line of Mid-America to the Gulf, now operated by Canadian National. Though no interchange happens between the two railroads, they both still can put on a show worth watching. Rutherford, Pennsylvania bound stacks on train 20T poke into Sydney for a meet. No worries about making track speed today with right around 12,000 horsepower up front on this 35N train. 35N operates from Conway, Pennsylvania to Decatur, Illinois. On the east side of Sydney, the Union Pacific has a connection for trains coming off the Villa Grove sub from the south and going east. Some of these trains will be seen later in the show. Also east of Sydney, we see racks and stacks go each way past the monster storage bins of Frito-Lay. Now, don't get too excited. You won't get any free smells here. This plant only receives inbound raw meal. West of Homer, loaded hoppers roll west for A.E. Stanley Processor in Decatur. Homer, like most small towns, hosts a trackside grain elevator. Like many of the other small communities along the line, Homer is home to a few thousand people with great southern Illinois hospitality. Plenty of friendly town folks are around to strike up conversation. Train 255 rocks along with goods in tow for the BNSF at Kansas City and eventually on to Saginaw, Texas. Bryan is the beginning of double track for nearly 20 miles through Danville to Eldon, where it goes back to single track. NS 3525 leads a scene becoming more and more uncommon, that being long hood forward operating units. These particular locomotives were built to run this way with the control stand on the conductor's side. Here, train D91, with one of 45 B32-8s, leads the local out of Danville's Tilton Yard to Frito-Lay. Catlin is a photo-friendly place with a number of usable locations around town. A detector is just west of town at milepost 309.3. Welcome to Danville. With a population of about 33,000 people, this small city has what you need if you wish to tie up for the night. Not the most scenic, but it does offer more than just the NS if you choose to venture around. CSX has its busy north-south line with a small yard on the southeast side of the city. Also, the KBSR comes in at Newall on what is left of the Milwaukee Road's Southeastern. Train 124 makes its way through town. In about a mile, they will cross the CSX at grade. Train IOT follows close behind 124. IOT sounds like an odd symbol, and it kind of is. It is a second section, or extra, of 20T. Eldon is the location of where the track goes back to single-style running, and the location of another nice set of accessible searchlight-style signals. Train 121 is an Oakwood Yard in Detroit to Brush Yard in Decatur move. It has its speed in check as they prepare to head up Track 1 into Danville. With the widespread success of intermodal over the recent decades, the 86-foot boxcars have become the victim of dwindling numbers due to the convenience of the container. So it is nice to see strings of these types of cars hanging on in this auto artery. Another Kansas City to Detroit Triple Crown train comes off Track 1 at Eldon. Just crossing the border into Indiana, we set up at State Line City, which is really just a small town, but with a great spot to watch trains on the former Wabash. one of Norfolk Southern's 20 heritage units. This particular one, sporting the New York Central scheme, leads train 17K at State Line City. "34N, a Decatur to Conway, Pennsylvania train, rolls through the raindrops at the quiet town of Marshfield. Here, the train is passing the out-of-rail service grain elevator. NS Train 145, a bison yard in Buffalo, New York, to the Claycomo Ford plant in Kansas City train, struts its stuff on a cloudless afternoon. Train 748 with coal from western Illinois is destined for Duke Power in Bellows Creek, North Carolina. The three big GEs in charge of the 14,000 tons of coal pulls this train with ease. These trains only run once or twice a month from either Deer Run or Shea Mine, making it sort of an elusive move. NS 8341 in another life wore Conrail 6098. Along with former Conrail 6029, these two team up once again to move train 35N from Conway, Pennsylvania to Decatur. The train is traversing Redwood Creek between Marshfield and West Lebanon. In Attica, train 14E just crossed over the Wabash River and into a gentle left curve as they graze the very north side of town. A BNSF H1 breaks the streak of NS Black as it leads train 35Z shortly after 14E disappears. At Control Point Flint, a mixed freight is led by a Union Pacific SD-70M. Flint is the west end of the controlled siding in West Point, and that just happens to be the name for the east end. Both ends are very photo-worthy and easy to access. Here we see a big collective effort of trains in this area. This train is led with NS 4000 and 4300. These locomotives are designated as PR-43Cs. Progress Rail PR-43C is a 4,300 horsepower CC genset locomotive. It is the result of a conversion of existing EMD SD50 locomotives. This involves replacing the original EMD 645 prime mover with a pair of Caterpillar engines, a 3,600 horsepower C175 engine, and a 700 horsepower C18 engine. 34N sweeps around a gentle curve just before ducking under County Road 300 in Shadeland. Just west of Lafayette, we catch several trains. The first is led with a recently repainted Ex-Conrail C40-8W. An ex-Conrail SD50 is in charge of this train. 5442 was once Conrail 6775. A single unit takes this Triple Crown train over Indiana Highway 231 west of Lafayette. CSX's Monon sub is seen crossing the highway in the background. A trio of General Electric engines have the honors of guiding Train 20T at West Demon. This is where the Y is located for the beginning of the Frankfort branch. NS 2660 leads a grain train at what is called Lafayette Junction. This is where the NS and CSX share tracks through Lafayette, where there are no grade crossings. In 1994, the city took on a project to eliminate 42 at-grade crossings, resulting in what every other city across the country could only dream about. With this project, pedestrian bridges were built for safe crossing as well. This is a bonus for rail fans, giving them elevated advantages. Three Jeeps and a hopper make a quick stop at the signal on their way toward East Yard in Lafayette. Of the four tracks, the closest is used by the KBSR. The second is generally used by the CSX, and the NS uses the FAR 2. Eastbound road railers join up with the newly opened Hoosier Heartland Highway, also called Highway 25. Many crossings along the way have been eliminated and replaced with bridges and frontage roads. This can be very rewarding for photography, as you can never lose with elevation. Kansas City-bound 21T is pulled along by one of NS's rebuilt SD60s into the new SD60E class. Built as NS 6562, now carrying NS 6935, this unit is one of many rebuilds that started to roll out of Norfolk Southern's Juniata shops in November 2010. Retaining their original 710 prime mover, it is rebuilt and re-rated to 4,000 horsepower along with the new fuel injection, a motor-driven air compressor, electrics, and a few other internal features. With the sun about done for the day, the crew on train D1V are anything but done as they head east for climbers to spot the train for loading. A switch replaced the prior day has 35N going through a 10-mile-per-hour slow order until the maintenance of way crews have the track surfaced to their liking. Later in the day, it will be back to business as usual. With the new highway still not open, what a better opportunity to take in a few trains minus the sound of highway traffic. Norfolk Southern's Lehigh Valley painted ES-44 leads this train east of Buck Creek. Moving right on up the line, we stop for a few moves at Colburn. First up is 35N, the daily Pittsburgh to Decatur train. Next, in Colburn, we move to the west of the curve for train 15E, which runs from Bellevue, Ohio to Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Earlier in the show, we made mention of these trains getting on and off the Union Pacific at Sydney to run south on the Villa Grove sub. This is just what this 15E will do upon arriving. We move into the 1858 founded unincorporated town of Colburn. Here, we set up by the searchlight signals on the west end of the siding for a Triple Crown train. NS Train 15E for the Union Pacific in Pine Bluff, Arkansas makes all sorts of noise as they curve through town. If horn audio is what you like, then Delphi is for you. 8 crossings in all, stacked one after another. E with former Conrail SD60M number 5533 makes its way east. Another former Conrail unit, this time a Dash 8, breezes past Ewell with train 20T. Notice the third unit, another 60E rebuild. In May 2011, NS purchased 20 ex-Chicago and Northwestern units from Helm Leasing. The NS 6909 in its past life was CNW 8025. Another former CNW unit, this one once being the 8008, now NS 6914. It is in solo control of train 260. To many, this has to come as pretty exciting news as NS plans to have 240 SD60Es through 2019. Externally, these units have the same features with the exception a new protective cab that has more internal space. Original SD60M cabs had 59 square feet. The new E's have 74. small community of climbers has quite a bit going on for itself. First off, a siding, which train 120 is pulling into. Also, the town has a bridge for a good video vantage point. A large Archer Daniel Midland grain loadout, an ethanol plant, and a diamond for shortline Winamax Southern gives the town even more railroad charm. NS 2686 eases in and out of town while the crew of 20T patiently waits for their turn. NS 7129 with train B93 crosses the ex-Pennsylvania tracks of the Winamax Southern. Just underway from the last stop of the day at the ethanol plant, the local is going to have a good-sized train back home. Just north of Climbers is Shortline U.S. Rail Corporation. We take a moment to capture them heading toward Logansport. B93 clips along at the control point Penn, which is the east end of Climber Siding. Train 255, a Detroit to Volts Yard in Kansas City run, bangs over the former Pennsylvania Railroad diamond in downtown Logansport. NS remains as the lone Class 1 rail line through town. Two short lines play a small role here. The Toledo, Peoria, and Wester comes in from the west at Peoria Junction, meeting the Winnemac line from Bringhurst to Kokomo. At one time, rail lines radiated in 9 different directions through Logansport. About 7 miles from the east end of the Lafayette District is New Waverly. Here, a Decatur to Elkhart train with its NS 9739 rolls through the Indiana farm country just west of town. NS 2665 leads train 14E, which is a South Yard mixed freight from Lafayette, Indiana to Bellevue, Ohio. The train hugs the gentle curve and makes a quick exit east. We are at West Peru, Indiana, which is the east end of the Lafayette District. Here we are treated to a shot of the nickel plate 765 steam locomotive. This is a special that ran from Fort Wayne to Lafayette and back. Running on symbol 951, this train operated on October 26, 2013. The end of the subdivision is here at West Peru. A couple NS freights close out our show. There is more to this ex-Wabash line, and our tour will continue in a future C-Vision program. Thank you for joining us.